Kia ora. My name is Jeff Fahrensohn. I manage the building inspection team at Auckland Council. Some of you may have dealt with me before, or you definitely would have dealt with someone in our team. I'm kind of a little bit biased towards the inspection and the on-site stuff. So today I'm going to show you some of the things that we see from a council lens. And this is just a bit tight. Is that still coming through right? Yep. So I just give you a quick heads up on the state of play at the moment. We're currently, we're still doing about 1,000 inspections a day out there. So your one job, your one inspection for the week or for the month really does sort of come into context when you're looking at the sheer volume. We are all still busy out there. The building consents are slowing down. They're down about 14% at the moment. So there's definitely going to be a bit of a lull coming around September, August. That's going to start hitting the stuff on site. And we're going to make use of that. So for the last 5 years, or this boom seems like it's been going for a long time, we're going to look to really concentrate on upskilling and training. There is a heap of inconsistency, and I hear that a lot. And today I'm sure some of you will have some questions about jobs that will be contrary to what I show you up here. If that's the case, feel free to talk to me afterwards. But there is definitely the challenge out there in terms of consistency. And that's not just from our side, because I'm the first to put my hand up, but it's also out there on site. Consistency and quality is something that we I just quickly did the numbers while I was at the desk there, can show. So for passive fire, for instance, I can actually data set the specific passive fire line items out of our inspection checklists and tell you the main sort of issues that we're coming across, and we can see trends. And at the moment, for passive fire, it's failing at 28%. Now, that seems quite high, but just generally speaking, that's actually around about average at the moment. Our failure rate across all the inspections is around 25% on average. And you get some pretty high ones. The commercial finals are up around 40%. Then you get the plumbing, normally around about 9%. So you can see there's a vast range there, and passive fire sits right in the middle. The good thing though, and a lot of people do spill a lot of doom and gloom in these sorts of things, is that passive fire is probably one of the biggest increases in pass rates over the last 5 years. And that's huge, because we have seen, and my colleagues here will be able to confirm this, over the last 5 years, we have come a huge way. And we've got to sometimes stop and just give yourselves a pat on the back for that, because it is a lot of work. There are specialists that have popped up that we never used to have. There are people now that go punch a hole through an intertenancy wall. In the back of their mind, they know that they've got to put something there to protect it for passive fire, whereas previously, a lot of them didn't. So yeah, in our world, we are seeing an improvement, and it's really good to see too. Some of the quality assurance examples that we're seeing out there now are best practice, and as that stuff spreads and becomes more prominent in our place, particularly with the early contractor engagement models that we're seeing out there now, the higher quality we're going to get. And that's not just for passive too, that's right across the range. So today I'm going to talk quickly about the building code. I won't dwell on that too much. That's probably teaching you to suck eggs, but the building consent documentation has always been a bit of a tricky one. RFIs are something that we don't want to do. And some of you might say, well, we just get RFIs, looks like it's going to stop the clock at day 19 or whatever. I can tell you the last thing we want to do is actually send an RFI. The RFIs are 95% of consents that come in the door get RFIs. So put that time in and that productivity waste down the track, it's huge. So no RFIs is actually the ultimate goal. Coming with BIM and AI and all this future stuff that we're looking at now, I can see that drastically improving over the next 5 to 10 years. The quality assurance stuff on site, I'll talk a bit about the inspection things, substitutions. Another bugbear for a lot of people out there, particularly if you're struggling to get products or those that are specified in your consents, and what to do. Compliance evidence that we would expect to see at a minimum, and some of the issues on site. And finish with the CCC if I've got time. So quickly with the Building Act, we've seen this hierarchy triangle before. The Act starts at the top. That basically tells us buildings must be built safe. There's some other things there as well about healthy and accessible and all that sort of stuff, but we're focusing on passive fire here. Regulations, the regulations drop down from that building must be safe to you must follow this building code to make sure that building is safe. So there's a heap of regulations there. We go into the building code. They have a very high level objective, functional requirement, performance criteria. I'll come back to that. Then we go into the methods of determining that compliance. Those are your acceptable solutions, your alternative solutions, the cited standards, non-cited standards, code marks, determinations. There's a whole bunch of things there that we use to determine compliance or to assess compliance. You provide that stuff. I'm going back to this triangle. If I focus on the building code now around passive fire, we go straight to the CDOCs. If you're familiar with the CDOCs, it's quite a big document. There's a lot of sections to it. Generally speaking, CAS2 is a space that we work in. That's the acceptable solution to a lot when it comes to passive fire in commercial buildings. And the bottom line really is this objectives of that building code here. So when people talk about the building code, they seem to jump automatically to that acceptable solution for some reason. The building code is only that front part on that, and it really does speak at a higher level. The acceptable solution is one means of determining compliance. And that's something that a lot of people, I realise, when we start speaking, it's like going to a builder on site and saying, where's your building code? And he'll point to 3604. And then when you look at it, it's 1976 or something like that on it. So everyone's got this sort of picture in their head what the building code is. The building code is very high level, and in this case, we're safeguarding people from unacceptable risk or injury caused by fire. That's the bottom line, isn't it? Everything stems from there as it goes down. How do you do that? What do you need to achieve to prove that that's going to work on site? So the building consent application. Focusing on passive fire, we start off with the fire report. The fire report obviously gives us the scope of where the strategy and the philosophy of the fire design regarding the building itself. In my examples today, I'm probably going to focus more on the complex commercial stuff. But one of the things we know is 60 to 70% of our new residential applications coming in the door, actually it's closer to 70%, is now multi-unit. So we used to have a total flip where 70% used to be standalone houses, and now it's gone the other way. So those multi-units, and those that are familiar with the medium density standards that have been released, you'll understand that the whole of Auckland, any residential area now, under the new legislative framework, will allow us to build 3 units, 3 stories high, without needing a resource consent, as of right. So that's 3 buildings on a property, 3 levels high, 11 metres, as of right. All of a sudden now you've got all this amenity loss with neighbouring lights and all that, but one of the big factors is that fire safety. Now fire safety in medium density is something that we're finding is a lot of our fail rates, and the reason behind that is because you have residential builders moving from that single, maybe a duplex or a terrace type house into medium density. All of a sudden they've got a whole bunch of stuff there that they're not used to. And there are knowledge gaps, and those knowledge gaps are things that are learning. Kiwi mentality is learning by trial and error, and we find a lot of builders are using inspectors to do their QA. When we turn up there, the last thing we would expect to see is every part of that being failed and a long snag list given to that contractor. That's not our job. That should be the contractor doing that snag list, and then we go in there and make sure that it's been done correctly. So when we see that, it's only going to be the start of this. When we start increasing our medium density in Auckland, we're going to find more and more builders moving from that residential space. Group home builders is a classic. They're starting to move into that space now, 3 level to 5 level. And all those train station areas, they have a walk zone where it's I think, I can't remember off the top of my head, it's like 800 metres or whatever from a train station. You can build to 22 metres under the medium density rules now. 22 metres, so you can go to 6-storey jobs, 6-storey high without needing a resource consent as of right. These are going to be following corridors, like we've got one with a light rail going out to the airport. That'll kick in. All of those areas will be all of a sudden we're looking like a London, Melbourne type built-up scenario there. So yeah, clearly the start of it. But just for today, yeah, we're going to focus more on the complex commercial stuff. This is a project fairly close to my heart. I enjoyed watching this go up. This is the CLT City Mission building in Hobson Street. Did anyone have any involvement with this? Yeah, of course. Yes, of course. Yeah, very cool building. I processed this building. I actually took it on as a bit of a project for myself, just to keep, because we have to keep our competency levels up, obviously, and I did the inspections for this, and I did all the CCC documentation work. And it was really good to see. That was the first time the last job I did before this was back in 2019, I think 2018. The change in quality was just drastic in terms of how they approach things like fire. And it wasn't just passive fire, it was also including fire during construction. After the ICC stuff, all of a sudden now we had to make sure everything was on board in terms of the hydrants being charged to a certain level below the deck they were working on, evacuation plans for the workers, and being a timber building, going up without the water supply being fully operational. You can imagine how tricky that was. So the fire report sets out the philosophy behind the design, and then we have a bunch of relevant information that comes in with that fire safety, the fire report. So the first thing that we're looking at here is plans that show the scope of that fire design. So the fire separations, smoke separations, the egress routes, and that gives us the high level requirements of where we start focusing on penetrations. So we're going to talk passive and doors. Then we get into some of the more specific stuff. This was a good example. These are all still the City Mission. They provided us a good overview of the passive penetrations, particularly around the HVAC and the hydraulic stuff. We had a very good heads up of what we were going to expect to see in their job. And you'll see there, they actually got quite specific in terms of any penetrations they'd have in here, damper locations that have, where are we? There's one there, fire damper. And so you've got, in one set of documents, we've already started building a picture of what we expect to see on site when it comes to passive fire. And then along with that came and this is something that doesn't happen very often, but a passive fire schedule, a penetration schedule was given to us. And the reason it was given to us, because this is CLT and it was the first of its kind in terms of its height, there was not many fire test reports to support a lot of those details. And so we had a mixture of actual test reports, but we also had stuff where we had to look at engineering judgments that had been provided to us. This became an international exercise. We had to use knowledge from beyond our shores because of the experience we see in America and Europe. We did have some a professor in Christchurch, Andy Buchanan, was probably our foremost expert in CLT construction, and he helped along with a few other of our principal specialists. But you can see what they do. They provide the type of penetration, the location, the wall floor, the location, and then the tested detail if it had a test. The tested reference, and then they went on to say in their mind if that reference showed that this is compliant, it passed, they put a yes. Otherwise, it would, red was very easy for us to see, but they'd show if it didn't pass, what they were going to do about it. And in some cases, there were details where they actually removed them from the design and redesigned, rerouted services. And then they follow up with the actual specifications of the products that they're going to use, and in some cases, followed by the actual fire assessment reports. So they've given us the evidence that shows that that product works in this situation, where that situation is going to occur in the building, and we've all got it in one place. So our one-stop shop at that fit-out stage. This is done in different stages. So by the time we had that fire report finalised, we were at stage 6, which was the fit-out stage. So it had plenty of time for everything else to be ironed out prior to that. Quality assurance. Moving into inspections now, this is what my team see every day. I wish, but they do see some pretty good stuff out there. So the reason why I say the need to inspect everything is if we don't have good quality assurance, we basically become clerk of works, and we just don't do that. We don't, unless you want an inspector on site every day, all day, we're not going to see. In a job just last week, 50,000 penetrations we were looking at. Wayne, Paddy, I don't know, you guys will see like just tens of thousands of penetrations in one building. So there's no way you can inspect them all. And so having a good quality assurance program is essential if you want to be able to drive quality in the industry. So how do you get that? Where we can reduce, well, I don't like to say reduce regulatory oversight, but it's probably more about reducing the number of inspections you need, relying on other means to determine compliance. So when we have this, we do a pre-construction meeting to talk about this. If you think that you've got a quality assurance program or you've got some sort of program or process in place, talk to your inspector. This pre-construction meeting happens prior to you starting the fit out. So everyone's all on site. You've got everyone that's relevant in that room at the same time. So we expect to see a fire engineer, passive fire specialist if they're involved, some representative from each of the services. So you've got the hydraulics there, you've got the HVAC there, the electrical, and then we have an agreement on what that process is. So we listen to the, hopefully it's all been circulated earlier so we can really get our heads around what they plan to do. Then we agree on that process, and when we agree on that process, we also look at some of the limitations to it, the scope, and some of the requirements that we're going to need to audit that, to make sure that what you say you're doing, you're actually doing. So the minimum quality of documentation is the way that we check as we go through the job that QA has been stuck to. So you are doing your quality control on site at those milestones that you said you were, and it's got to have some evidence to show that you're doing that. And we turn up once a month or once or every 2 weeks, whatever we agree to. I was doing it monthly at the City Mission, and I get all of that stuff electronically in Aconex or whatever system you want to use online, and go through and just make sure there are no gaps there. And that documentation could be everything from checklists from the applicator or the installer, checklists, and including photos, checklists from the third-party inspection or audit company, if there is one. And generally we tried to use some third-party stuff on stuff that was so specialised our inspectors couldn't do. And a good example will be the intumescent coating. We had not only the great QA from the intumescent coating applicator, but we also had a third-party independent come in and do their random sampling as well. And so we had all of those QA checklists, reports. Engineers, anyone else that was involved in that construction provided that documentation at certain milestones. And so we're looking at some of the good examples we see out there, plenty of tagging, it's clean. The old adage about walking on site and having a dirty site, you know that this has historically been true 99% of the time. When an inspector walks on site and it's an absolute mess, we know that pretty much stems on to how the quality of the work's going to look too. And the same thing happens here with commercial work. So nice, clean examples. Here is a example of some product substitution frameworks that we could use to help speed up the process. Now this is an example of a template that a contractor has actually written up themselves, and they've provided a list of their products that they want to substitute. So, and then they've given the reason behind it, they've provided the actual product and the test reference. They can support this with any of those documents that you need. So if there are documents that are not on the FBA that we can't check the register or some other method, they will provide that for us. So that could be the actual test report of products if it was a certain specific or complex junction. We try and teach our inspectors, and this is probably, that we're about 80% of the way there. I'm not going to say we're perfect, but we want to do this sort of stuff. If it's black and white, we want to do them as minor variations if we can. And when I say black and white, it's got to be, well, we start with the very highest level of compliance. Someone hands me a product that's got a code mark that's deemed to comply, and they're going to use that product in the same scope as the code mark says. I'm going to tick that off and walk away. That's simple. So if you go along those lines and work your way down, we use the FPA product register as one of the ways of determining whether or not it's a well-known product, its scope or its limitations. There could be brands, there could be a whole bunch of other things that we could use to determine compliance as a minor variation. We have in the past used things like technical opinions or brands appraisals for products. There have been internationally independent or well-known fire test reports from known independent labs. And like I said, we also use that register at FPA. So the actual work itself, 5 years ago, this is the sort of stuff that we saw here. It was some of it was a little bit comical, but this is the sort of level of understanding that we saw people have out on site. And now we're still seeing it. The difference is there are at least people attempting now to try and install passive fire. But in these cases here, we still have issues with it. Some of the more tricky issues that we are seeing now, because people are actually starting to get, particularly when you do have a passive fire specialist, they're getting pretty good at situations that are beyond their control when they turn up and there's a penetration like this where it's hard up against a 45-degree concrete and there's no tested system to be able to put in that place, and they're coming up with other sort of solutions for that. These are the sorts of scenarios that do prove challenging on site. And like I always say, that early engagement in terms of talking to the inspector early, what you're planning on doing there will help speed things up when it comes to the crunch in terms of the final inspection. Performance of those products. This is actually this was only a few weeks ago. We had a fire in one of our apartment car parks here in town, and just so happened that there was a couple of fire collars. One worked very well, cut off the cables, and the other one pulled out of the wall. When you look closely at that, it was really clear the fixings were inefficient for that one there. And again, it comes down to that installation quality. So just finishing off now with the CCC requirements. Again, probably focusing more here on the penetration stuff. The fire door stuff and intermescence probably got a slightly different variance to this. But the PS3 from the installer, the applicator. The PS4 from a fire engineer, if they have been engaged to do that. And those include the site inspection reports. We generally want to make sure that that fire engineer has actually been on site and provided those observation reports, not just relying on a CM, a construction monitoring one type PS4. For the engineers in the house that are familiar with the CM monitoring, that we do still have engineers using the CM1, which basically means I won't go to site, I'll rely on someone providing a PS3 to me, and I'll issue my PS4 based on that. And in some cases it works. We do that with driven piles every day, not a problem. But when it comes to high risk components like this stuff, we need to have a appropriate CM level. As-built plans showing penetrations. This is basically part of that QA documentation here. Any third-party certification that was required. One of the things that a lot of people don't realise, but when you're asked for a PS3 or a PS4 certificate, generally they are already agreed up front at on the consenting stage. If they're missed at the consenting stage, an inspector will bring it up during construction. You've got to agree to it at that point too. Because currently producer statements aren't in the Building Act and really is reliant on an agreement to provide those. So when you get the occasional you need to provide me a PS4 out of the blue at the CCC stage, that's not how it's supposed to work. You should already know that you've already agreed to provide that. If we started doing that, people would be not getting CCCs because there's people that can't go back and look through walls to give PS4s and goes all the way down through to the foundations. So it's one of those things. that it's been agreed up front. If you, at any point during construction, feel that this is going to be affected, you need to bring that up as soon as you can with the inspection team. Because as far as they're concerned, they're following those conditions and advice notes all the way through to the CCC stage. And yeah, just some examples of the as-built documentation. You get these in reports. I've seen reports, you know, that are like a phone book thick, and then you've had the one pages. But generally, we want to see a plan, an as-built plan for each floor. It's good to use the fire report plans because they also provide the fire separation locations as well. Some references, and then that's followed by a page of the actual referenced penetrations that are in this plan. Now, it's one of the things that we see quite often is they put the labels on temporarily just to get the photo, and then they actually put the labels on permanently in their finished position. If it was in the finished position, sometimes you won't get it in the same shot. So that's quite a trick for new players. But apart from that, yeah, we're getting some very good quality QA documentation coming through. And these are, some of them are off-the-shelf software programs, some of them are specifically designed, and some people just use PDFs with photos. It really is the big variance in the quality that we see out there. So that's me. It's my 25 minutes.